Wes Goldberg, Tuesday, August 20th. We're recording on Monday, August 19th. But we didn't talk about the NBA Cup last week when we talked about the schedule on the Just Basketball show. So I just want to ask.
Can't believe we missed that.
Well, so this leads me to what I'm going to ask you, and that maybe tipped your hand a little bit. But year 2 of the Cup, now with branding and we're used to it in theory, all this stuff.
Yeah.
A scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you about the NBA Cup being back for round 2?
0.
Okay.
I mean, it adds no excitement to me about the NBA season being back. Like, I don't get more excited about the NBA season being back now that there's an NBA Cup associated with it, embedded within the season schedule. That, to me, does not matter. It doesn't influence me one way or the other. I'm not a hater, necessarily, of the NBA Cup, but I have yet to find a reason to care more about the NBA Cup than any other game in the NBA season.
I am more interested in it, but I think that's because of my European soccer fandom, because I love the idea of like another thing to play for, right? I think I just like the idea of that. But it's going to be like this would be my take. I think the next generation of NBA fans might be more invested in it organically than people our age that are in their 30s, that didn't grow up with this, that kind of see this as like a TV product to some degree, right? But I could see, right, and all this stuff sort of is, unless it's like founded in like the 1800s or whatever. Like that's just the nature of sports and capitalism as a mix and a business thing. But I think that I could see a world where this feels like a bigger thing in like 10 years. That's the bet I feel like they're making.
I think we could get there. And we don't have to do the whole radio segment on how would I fix the NBA Cup and how would I fix the NBA season in general. But I do think this does need fixing. The difference between the NBA Cup, this in-season tournament, and sort of the European soccer model is that in the European soccer model, they just go do the thing, right? There's this other cup, there's this other event, there's this other tournament, and you just go and you do the tournament, and then you go back to your team that you were on previous, and you do that season, right? And then you just kind of do them. The problem with the NBA Cup is it's embedded within the season while the other regular games that are not a part of the NBA Cup are also happening. I actually think that the NBA needs to figure out is a way to just break this thing off and just go and do it and make it an event and just make it so that everybody knows that these 2 weeks out of the year are going to be the NBA Cup, and that's what we're doing. I think that might be the only difference. Otherwise, to me, I feel like right now, the NBA Cup is something that pushes casual fans away rather than draw them in because it's so confusing. I get so many questions about what exactly it is and why I should care about it, about the in-season tournament last year, than I had answers for. I'm like, I don't really know what it is, and I don't know why you should care about it because I don't think the NBA has done a good job of defining that just yet.
I am curious to see how it looks and what the receptions align with this year. I also just want something akin to what we got last year, like a team like the Pacers. Like I think that is what can make this fun. Is if a team is just hot, like if the Kings, for instance, like DeMar DeRozan just cooks in the NBA Cup for whatever reason, I could get into this and get excited. My
favorite idea for how to fix this too came from my my co-host on Locked On NBA, Adam Myers. He said,
"So are we doing the radio segment? Is that what we're?"
No, just one quick one. You just give me a yay or a nay, and then we can move it along. But just do this at the beginning of the season. Just knock it out as like this big showcase tournament to start the year. Hey, here are all the teams that you should care about. Because this NBA Cup is starting at the beginning of the season, you kind of bookend the year with 2 tournaments, right? The playoffs and then the NBA Cup. And it kind of counts for something. Who's the best team to start the year and then who's the best team at the end of the year could be worth, I don't know, a little bit of something more than who's the best team at the beginning of December. This sort of arbitrary thing that we came up with. That doesn't really make much sense.
Yeah, because the one thing I would say they didn't do, is if they're going to take from the European soccer model, is like the FA Cup in England, for instance. Like the FA Cup final is after the Premier League season ends.
Right.
Like they're both
things. Yes.
Yeah, and the NBA is like, what if we just stopped it in the middle because we can't take away from the finals? And it's like, I get that, but then this is weird.
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Now that I'm thinking about the structure, but it's bothering me. Wes. All right, on today's show, we're going to talk about our favorite NBA rotations. We have a few stipulations that I'll get to as we get going here, but this is the Just Basketball show for Tuesday, August 20th. What is up? I am Chris Manning. That is Wes Goldberg. If you haven't already, follow, rate, and review on your podcast app platform of choice. Hit subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans at YouTube channel. And check us out on TikTok, Instagram, and X. Want to tell you, too, that support for today's episode of the Just Basketball Show comes from BetMGM. Step 1, you download BetMGM Sportsbook on iOS or Android and sign up using our code JustBasketball. If you do that, if you haven't signed up yet, use our bonus code JustBasketball, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Step 2, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager in any game. Step 3, you receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. Just make sure to use bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Wes, let's get into this. Let's get into rotations, our thoughts about this. And the stipulation is this. Everyone knows, I think, that there are teams right now that we idealize as having the best rotations as of right now. We look at the Boston Celtics, the defending champs in the East, top 8, 9 in that team, even some of their depth that they can just sprinkle out, Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, whomever. Those guys are good. Xavier Tillman in there as well, I think. They just have like a bunch of good players. We kind of know that is perfect. The lesson there is sometimes this takes time. You got to get lucky, all this stuff. But that's obvious. The Oklahoma City Thunder are the team, I think, of that case in the West. Particularly after trading Giddey for Caruso, a piece that just fits better. Check growing into himself. All the other kind of lottery ticket picks they have. Wiggins and Kenrich Williams and all these guys on the fringe of their roster that are awesome on top of theirs. Adding Isaiah Hartenstein, and they already have Shea and J-Dub, right. And Shea. Like, that team is loaded. We know that. So we're going to go to teams outside of those big two. And I want to start with the Philadelphia 76ers, because I think in adding Gershon Yabusele and being the team that, with the cap ramifications, that $2.5 million buyout does count against their cap, paying him a salary as well. Like, they were the team willing to spend the money. Is he an all-star? No, but that is a good NBA player. That is a solid NBA player who I think can be a good 4 for them coming off the bench, playing between Paul George and Joel Embiid. I really, really like that fit. And if you look at their 8, Embiid, Maxey, Paul George, Caleb Martin's there. You have Yabusele.
Kelly Oubre.
You have Kelly Oubre. You have Kyle Lowry. You have Andre Drummond to eat. You add Eric Gordon. That's like 10 guys that I like, Wes. And I think this team, KJ Martin on a flyer perhaps still. You still have like room maybe for a trade down the line at some point. I wouldn't put it past it or more. But this team just has a really good rotation at a level that, like, this is a championship level core to me now. This is a championship level rotation to me now.
No doubt about it, right? I mean, they're the winners of the offseason. We could talk. I think NBA nerds love to make like the Thunder the winners of the offseason because they added Isaiah Hartenstein, who's awesome. They added Alex Caruso, who's awesome. But the Sixers added Paul George, and that matters more than any Alex Caruso or any Isaiah Hartenstein that you can add, right? They set out with a goal to use their cap space on a max player, and they did that. And then they did that, and they stole a key rotation piece from a rival in Caleb Martin. They added a guy like Eric Gordon. They bring back Kyle Lowry. This team is deep. They've got guys on value contracts, and they have a guy who can potentially win MVP again in Joel Embiid. So let's frame what we're trying to do here. Basically, we've already set the Celtics and the Thunder aside, right? Those are the teams with the I guess we can call them the deepest teams in the NBA, with the best top 5, best top 8, the deepest, best rotations in the league. They fit well together, etc. Which one of these other teams that we're about to talk about can kind of get to that same level? Maybe by the end of the season, we're talking about them at the same level as the Celtics or the Thunder in terms of depth and quality rotation players. So I think the 76ers are very much there. If we're talking about just the teams in the East, I would have them as the second best rotation in the East. I would have them as my second deepest team in the East. I think the Knicks would be the other team that you could put here. To me, what it comes down to is, we could talk about the Yabuselis and all this kind of stuff all we want. Do we value the top kind of 4 part of this top 8 rotation more than we value that next kind of tier of guys, that middle group of the rotation, the guys 4 through 8 in the rotation who play important roles in that rotation, but might not be, at the end of the day, as important as the guys at the top of each of these rotations? And I do tend to value the guys at the top of the rotation more than the guys in that 4 to 8 range, although those guys are important. But because I value those guys more, I would have Philadelphia over the Knicks. I think every Knicks fan is going to sit here and say, we're the deepest team in the East. We're maybe outside of Boston. We're deeper. Look at what we got. We got Mikal Bridges. We're bringing back OG Anunoby. Look at all these things we did. And I would still just say, yeah, but Philly added Paul George and you added Mikal Bridges, and Paul George is just better than Mikal Bridges, right? And Joel Embiid is just better than Jalen Brunson. I love Jalen Brunson, but Jalen Brunson's not winning an MVP anytime soon, as close as he got last year. I like Julius Randle. I like Tyrese Maxey more than I like Julius Randle, right? Philadelphia's best three is still better than the Knicks' best three. And then it's, okay, well, can the guys sort of in the caboose kind of back them up a little bit more and close the gap between them and Philly and between the Knicks and the Celtics, obviously? Yeah, I guess you can make an argument there, but I'd still take the Sixers roster over the Knicks roster.
And in thinking about Philly, West, like, I think the thing that if I want to identify like a part of it, because I like it, and I do like it better than the Knicks as of right now. I think just because of the fit, and I think that's what I just love about what they're doing here, and I think that's part of the lesson here. It's like, okay, I think if I'm a GM of a team, well, like, I might have preferences of what I want out of a star player, right? But the goal is ultimately get star talent in any shape and size and position through your door. Like, that is your job, right? Mm-hmm. You can't be too picky unless you're like, I mean, the Knicks are maybe the team that has decided to be picky and it's worked, or the Lakers, but like most teams, the vast majority of teams in the NBA cannot be picky about how you get star talent in the door. You just have to do it. Philly, understanding that, didn't try to like recreate a Houston team that Morey built to in this situation and just like have Embiid work in that. They said, okay, how do we build the best team for Joel? Hitting on Maxey, obviously a bit of luck, a bit of really good player development work, and a bit of seeing unrecognized talent. That is obviously a big part of that because you have this dynamic scoring guard to take some of the pressure off Joel to manufacture points for you play after play. When you go through the rest of the guys, Paul George is perfect for Maxey, who's also a star, could be an all-star this year. And everyone else on that roster is just like, okay, they can shoot, they can dribble a little bit, they have good size for their position. It's just about, and then Yabusele, I look at him and it's like, okay, you have a guy who's going to play hard as shit, who's going to play the four for you, can body some of the fours, I could see them trying to use him on centers at times, just and let Joel roam and play some help and clog up the paint that way. Everything to me, when you look at this, and this is the biggest thing I think I can say about this offseason for them in this rotation, is that they understood what their stars are and said, how do we build for that? They didn't try to shoehorning guys that didn't fit. And I think sometimes, Wes, we do see teams, not as much recently, I think, because the league has gotten smarter, but there was an era where good teams would get the veterans that were just named veterans and hope it'd work. Philly did the opposite of that, and they could I think that is the biggest credit I can say about what they're doing here.
Well, they did a little bit of a mix of both things, right? They got the name veterans and a guy like Eric Gordon and Kyle Lowry, but all these guys have very valuable playoff experience, and they're not relying on them to necessarily even start, right? It's just like, hey, these are just guys that we want in our locker room. Pat Riley likes to call these kinds of guys shields and swords. It's like, we just need shields and swords, right? We just need weapons. And those guys are weapons. They're not, relied on every night starters. To your point earlier, you don't get to choose your superstars in the NBA. You don't, right? You end up with James Harden. If you're Daryl Morey in Houston, you get this swindle of a trade from Oklahoma City. You end up with James Harden. You realize what this guy can do in isolation, and you say, what can we do to double down on his talent? Then you end up with basically the opposite player in Joel Embiid, a lumbering center who's a post player, and you say, what can we do to maximize Joel Embiid? And you tried a few different variations of it. Heck, you even brought James Harden back in, and you didn't play James Harden basketball. You still played Joel Embiid basketball. And this team has figured it out. It's taken a long time, but Maxey is a very good number 2 for Joel Embiid. Paul George makes a lot of sense in terms of forming this big three, and I do think they finally got the guys that make sense. Kelly Oubre had a great year for them last year. I think Caleb Martin makes a ton of sense for them. They have enough ball handling. They have enough versatility. I think the roster fits. I think you have the star at the very top, who is that kind of guy who you can win a championship with in Joel Embiid. At least, when we're considering if you have one of the best 5 guys in the NBA, Joel Embiid still needs to prove it in the playoffs, obviously. But this is the roster to prove it with, isn't it? Like, this is it, man. Like, you are out of excuses if it doesn't work this year. I'm not trying to do a whole Joel Embiid radio segment, is he clutch or not thing. But That's what it is. My question to you is if I wanted to try to take the Knicks side of this, because I do think there's one other team I would bring up in the East, but a tier below these teams, but I just think it would be worth mentioning. I'll save that for a second. But if I was going to take the Knicks side of it, I would argue 4 through 8 is, I think, superior to Philadelphia's 4 through 8. My only question is, do you agree? And if so, by how much, right? So I would take the Knicks' top 3. I would just say Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, Mikal Bridges. That's their top 3. I would put Anunoby as their 4th best player, Mitchell Robinson, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, and then you've got Miles McBride, Precious Achiuwa. Take your pick for like their 8th guy there, but those are your 8 and 9. So you got Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson, DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride. Versus Philadelphia's kind of 4 through 8, Kelly Oubre, Kellen Martin, Kyle Lowry, Eric Gordon, and Yabusele, that Andre Drummond kind of mix there. What back half of the roster do you like more?
The Knicks.
Yeah. By how much? Like leaps
Not
and bounds better? Because I think I'm there.
It's a good... I think it has to be leaps and bounds just because, like, you get out of Bridges, like, DiVincenzo, Hart.
They're awesome.
Like, Anunoby, these guys are all, like, very well paid, but they're all, like, DiVincenzo, like, Cleveland would be like, can 2 firsts for Dante DiVincenzo this way? Like, he was that good at stretches last year.
Yeah.
Hart is, like, the most, like, dogged, tough role player that you have in the league right now, and just absorbed a ton of minutes last year and was fine. And I don't know if I would do that year over year, but like he's capable of that if you need to tap into that. Anunoby, when healthy, is just like revered as one of the best defenders in the league. And like if that's your 4th best guy, that is just better than Kelly Oubre is your 4th best guy, or Yabusele is your 4th best guy. Like that is like you have like fringe all-star kind of guys. Like even if we could look at Philly and say they have 3 all-stars this year, and then you look at the Knicks top 3 and say, like, I probably think Brunson's the only one I would say I would feel great about being an all-star this year.
You're getting every other year Julius Randle now. So
yeah,
he could be all-NBA. So
yeah, could be all-NBA. Could be second-team all-NBA this year. Who knows? You're right. But it's just one of those things where it's pretty remarkable, Wes, that, like, the Knicks, to their credit, like, have just that is their identity. Like having a deep ass rotation is just a really strong identity.
Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo was arguably New York's 2nd most important offensive player in the playoffs last year, right? With Julius Randle out, Dante DiVincenzo was sort of the second option behind Jalen Brunson. And then Josh Hart, you could argue, was their 2nd best player, when you consider both ends of the court. There were times where he just was their 2nd best player in the playoffs. So, now you're looking at them as their 5th, 6th, 7th guys in the rotation. That's huge because you've got guys who have played real playoff minutes and in real stakes, and they're not like they can just be them. They're not carrying more weight than they're capable of. In fact, they're probably being underutilized. But you often see teams that win championships have guys who are underutilized, right? That's the whole thing. Like Drew Holiday last year for the Celtics did not do everything that he's capable of. You think about these super teams, or not even super teams, but these loaded teams that win championships. How many of the guys in the rotation are always talking about, hey, we got to sacrifice this and that, and I'm sacrificing touches and all these things for the greater good. The Knicks do have that shape about them, and they do have guys that are going to be asked to do that. I just still think for as superior as the Knicks 4 through 8 is over the Sixers 4 through 8 isn't bad, and their top 3 is so much better than New York's. I think you can legitimately have 3 All-NBA guys in Philadelphia this year. I would be very surprised. The Julius Randle jokes aside, I would be very surprised if you had more than one All-NBA guy from the Knicks. And you could argue that Jalen Brunson might have had, like, would it surprise you if when he retires, we look at last year as his best season?
No, I think, but that also speaks to just how fucking good he was last year, and like that is just it's just like a lot. It's a hard level to maintain. It's not that he's not good. It's just that it's like that is such a high bar if you're trying to reach.
And he's never been there before,
right? Exactly.
Right? And I'm not want to do this like whole Jalen Brunson doubter thing. That dude's a baller, man. Like that guy hoops, and I have nothing but confidence in him. And I would put money on him making All NBA next year. But I also feel really good about Joel Embiid making All NBA next year, and also probably Paul George and perhaps Tyrese Maxey. So those are those two. I think you and I agree, though, in terms of outside of Boston, it's Philadelphia and then probably New York. Can I give you one other team that I think is just worth talking about here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Give some love to the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, this was my runner-up. If I was going to pick a team from the East, this was my runner-up.
So I'll just give you the names here: Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Miles Turner, T.J. McConnell, Benedict Mathurin, Obi Toppin. That's my top 8 for Indiana. Maybe there's somebody outside of that can crack that top 8, but for now I feel pretty strong about that being my top 8. I think Halliburton is what he is. I think he's an all-NBA type of talent, transformative kind of player, an identity unto himself. Pascal Siakam, what a perfect fit. You get a full season with him now in Indiana. Andrew Nembhard took a real leap, it felt like, in the playoffs last year. It wouldn't surprise me if we're talking about him as Indiana's third best player by the end of the season. Aaron Nesmith, just a good two-way role player. Miles Turner had a great year last year, and Tyrese Halliburton kind of unlocks him. Obi Toppin, you re-signed him. He's a good kind of utility piece for them. My biggest question for the Pacers, did T.J. McConnell just have the best season of his career, and can he keep that up? We're talking about a guy that was out of the rotation to start the Pacers season and then was playing really important minutes for them in the playoffs. Does this upcoming season look more like it did in the playoffs? Was that just lightning in a bottle? Did he figure it out? I think I like the McConnell in the playoffs. I would bet on that happening more than but it's a worthwhile question to ask. And then what does Benedict Mathurin look like? What's his role on this team? Does he have to take a step back behind not just Halliburton, but Nembhard, behind some of these other guys that they've got coming up in the rotation? I don't know. Does he last the whole season with them? I don't know. But that would be my top 8, and I think it's a really strong one, and it's a young one that could be probably not at the same level as the Knicks or the Sixers, but yeah, I guess maybe a tier below them.
I think that the guy that I look at, Wes, among that 8 that I'm most intrigued by and have the most questions about this year is Benedict Mathurin. Benedict Mathurin is such a swing piece for them because he comes into the draft, and I really liked him coming into the draft. I like the frame. I like the intensity. I like what we saw on tape from him in college. He hasn't totally found that role yet, right? Like, he hasn't totally figured out, I think, exactly what the best version of him in the NBA is. Last year, obviously, he only plays 59 games. That didn't help. He shot better last year, particularly from 3. He was more efficient. That, to me, is a good sign. But I think there's more potential. There's only 21. Or excuse me, he's 22 now, just turned 22 about 2 months ago. Still really young, but it's year 3. This is a team that needs to take a step forward, that made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. He, to me, is a guy that if he crystallizes, you have another rugged wing defender, 3-and-D guy who can maybe handle a little bit. Like, that is a great thing to just add to your rotation. And if he doesn't, maybe he's a reclamation project trade chip. But to me, their ceiling, if he just figures it out and is awesome and is comfortable this year, they become even more dangerous. Like, I feel even better about that. I feel great about that 8 right now as we lay it out, because they have a bunch of guys that I just know exactly what they are and how good they're going to be. If he's going to figure it out this year in year 3, that top 8 becomes, I think, an even closer debate with the other 2 teams we're talking about.
Yeah, he was injured for most of last season. He was a candidate for 6th Man of the Year as a rookie for what he was doing.
Yeah,
and he's awesome. But the thing with Tyrese Halliburton, this is so much Tyrese Halliburton's team now, and he's your star quarterback. And everything you do, you need to basically do to maximize Halliburton's ability as your star quarterback. And I remember I wrote a piece about the Pacers last year for Real GM, talking about exactly this, and this was before they traded for Siakam, and Carlisle. I was talking to him, and he was talking about how they knew that they had trades to make, that they knew that they had roster moves, and that everything that they wanted to do was built around Halliburton's style of play. Halliburton came in, and immediately the pace jumps. Immediately the identity is taken after Tyrese Halliburton, and you have to think about that when you're constructing the roster. And so I just always think, okay, well, what are the kinds of players that fit with Halliburton? You need guys who can play the defensive end of the ball, who are bigger, right, stronger, and can be receiving threats for your star quarterback. And Pascal Siakam was a perfect fit, right? He could play fast. He moves off the ball. He could shoot from 3-point range. Obviously, what he does defensively is awesome. He can play make a little bit. He could be that big forward that you need next to a guy like Halliburton. So he's perfect. Nembhard has turned into a great fit, I think, with Halliburton in the way that he plays. But you look at a guy with like Mathurin, all the tools are there, right? Like if Halliburton's your quarterback, Mathurin feels to me like a little bit like DK Metcalf. He's just that downfield receiving threat, that home run threat, where you look at the great body, the frame, the athleticism, all that stuff is off the charts. But you also feel like, shouldn't you be a little bit more productive with all this talent and all this God-given ability? And yet he just really hasn't exactly been that. It is just going to be his third year. It's not even fair to call it his third year because he was so hurt last year. I'm still a buyer on Benedict Mathurin.
Me too.
I'm pretty So we're both bullish on him, and I think we're going to be on the right side of history there. But there's been a lot of guys that like Benedict Mathurin who also just flame out in the NBA. But if they can utilize his speed down the field, basically down the court, I think he could be an awesome receiver for Halliburton. And there's no reason why Halliburton should not be able to maximize Mathurin. But it's about putting it all together, which just feels like it hasn't completely gotten there yet with him.
And it's like by comparison, a guy on their roster in that 8 that you mentioned, Wes, that I think has figured out what he is Obi Toppin.
Yeah.
Like Obi Toppin is another receiver for Halliburton. He shoots it. He's
a tight
really
end,
good.
Right?
Yeah, he is Gronk, but at the NBA level. Like that's kind of what he is. All he does is dunk. He shoots some corner threes. He runs the floor and he tries hard on defense and rebounds. Like his role is incredibly simple, but it plays exactly to his skill set. When he got traded to Indiana, I remember him talking about how he wanted to play with Halliburton and he was like happy to go there. And that's obviously, to some degree, I bet you that is just lip service. Not to say it's not somewhat genuine, but this is a New York kid that played for the Knicks. I'm sure he would have liked to have it, work in New York. But this is like just a better situation for what he is. And he has embraced what he is, and it crystallizes perfectly. And it's like, I like that even though they did the Siakam thing, they brought him back. Because, like, the other part of this conversation, Wes, that I think the Sixers have done, I think the Knicks have obviously done, I think the Pacers have done in signing Obi Toppin this summer and re-signing Nembhard with an extension. Keeping your depth now with the top 8 is just going to be expensive. It just is. And I think you have to understand that and just say it's worth it. Our best chance to win is to understand that reality and just pay for these guys. And maybe there's a limit on this for all these teams. Maybe that's what happens with Mathurin at some point, or maybe there's a Nembhard trade or something. Maybe like if Mathurin breaks out, Aaron Nesmith is a trade candidate just so they can clear up their books a little bit. But keeping these guys before you not like getting ahead of that decision to me is it's like for the Herb Simon Pacers, who historically have not spent, that is a really good team building win for them.
I love how they've maximized the second draft. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, even Tyrese Halliburton was a second draft guy, right? And a little bit of a different circumstance. They traded their all-star center for him. But you Toppin, Nesmith, all these guys have a lot of what their rotation was second draft guys. So they've done a really good job constructing the roster. I got a quick breakdown for you. If the Pacers were a football team, what position these 8 guys would be. Tyrese Halliburton's your quarterback. Pascal Siakam is your outside wide receiver. Benedict Mathurin is also an outside wide receiver. I'm gonna put Andrew Nembhard at running back. I'm gonna put Aaron Nesmith as sort of that halfback guy who's just asked to maybe you hit him on a swing route. He picks up some blocks in the backfield a little bit. That's what he does. Miles Turner is gonna be your left tackle. T.J. McConnell's your backup quarterback. That one's obvious.
Well,
Toppin's the tight end.
Yeah, it was McConnell just either had to be a slot receiver or he had to be the backup quarterback.
Yeah, he needs the ball in his hands. I think he's your backup quarterback. You could argue that he's your center in terms of just communicating things that need to be communicated as a veteran. I like him as your backup QB.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who their slot.
He's got backup quarterback energy.
Yeah, like Caden is Doug. So is Doug is Doug McDermott like the third down slot receiver guy?
Yeah, Doug McDermott's a possession guy. He just runs
a curl.
Yeah, run that 8-yard button hook. We know what you're gonna do.
Yeah, just throw it like, and even that, like I liked Buddy Hield on this team. Getting Doug McDermott as like a replacement for that is like a backfill, even though it's like 80% of Buddy Hield. It's not a bad move in a vacuum.
Considering the difference in cost, also is huge there for them.
Yes.
So and he's obviously got the familiarity with the program and everything, and he could have his best year ever in a Pacers jersey because now he's playing with Halliburton.
Yeah, wouldn't shock me if he's better this year with a off season and preseason and everything to acclimate. That wouldn't shock me at all. Let's go to the West. Let me give you my team here. Let's talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yep.
I'm gonna go Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay. Even with losing Kyle Anderson, who I thought really faltered for them last year, Wes, I just love the top 7 of this team in particular. Where the rest of it comes, I think, is still an open question.
So,
but
let me ask you about. Okay, who's your? I know who your top 5. I know your top 6 are. Who's your 7th guy?
So it's still running through fully. Ant, Jaden McDaniels, Cat, Gobert, Mike Conley, Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is 7.
Okay, so Nickeil Alexander's your 7th. That's who I had as my 7th guy. Okay.
Yeah. And then after that, it's like, I don't, Ingles at this point, you're hoping for something. Like, all these other guys are really cheap. The lottery ticket is Rob Dillingham, and he is not for this year, I feel like, but maybe like a year from now, maybe he's your 8th guy. I mean, I think he probably gets minutes this year. Terrence Shannon and another younger guy you're taking a flyer on there.
Yeah, I think Terrence Shannon is more NBA ready right now than Dillingham, even though I'm a big Dillingham guy. I really didn't like him at the beginning of the draft process, and so I mentioned that because when I'm a pretty opinionated person, if you haven't been able to tell. When I just sort of decide that I'm out on a guy for whatever reason, it takes a lot to move me off that spot, and Dillingham did. The more film I watched on that guy, I was like, I love this guy. This guy is a star. He's going to be able to make shots at the NBA level right away. The only problem with him is he going to be able to stay on the court? But for this Minnesota roster, when Ant's off the court, they might have a real need for Dillingham, right? They're just going to need some sort of instant ramen offense, and it feels like Dillingham can be that for them. And I don't really know who else in the roster could, and that's where I kind of get back to Terrence Shannon. He might be able to provide a little bit of that, even though he doesn't project as sort of a lead option, even like a second unit lead option. But he could be pretty good too with the frame and everything that he's got going on. But I had Minnesota as mine. I love their depth. This is another situation where I like the top of their roster a lot. And when I talk about the top of the roster, I'm talking about Anthony Edwards. If he's going to take this full leap and be a consensus top 8 guy, then you've got that guy. And then with what he's been able to do with Karl Anthony Towns and the chemistry that they've built, Rudy Gobert has been good for them. McDaniels, you could argue by the end of the year, could be their second best player. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. Mike Conley's good, and he's on a value contract now. Naz Reid's awesome for them. 6th man of the year potential every single season. I like NAW quite a bit. And then you already mentioned the other guys. I think Minnesota's deep. I think they're awesome. I think we're looking at a team that's basically established itself as a regular season wins machine. And their only question is, do they have a championship ceiling? And if we're basing it on Anthony Edwards' ceiling, I think most of us would say yes.
Yes. I think what is also impressive about this is that they figured this out despite the Gobert-Towns trade, which I don't know how you felt about it at the time. Our former partner in crime here, Brendan Clean, was like the biggest defender I knew of the Gobert trade.
I defended it more than I think consensus. Doesn't sound like I was as thrilled about it as Brendan, but what I liked about it is I thought it was just going to make them a top 5 defense overnight. It has. And I just think you could pencil them in for 50 wins every year now with this group.
Yeah. And like you look at the way they built the rest of the roster, Conley, a very intentional choice. Having Jaden McDaniels
out, bringing him in was
huge. Having Jaden McDaniels in itself is just like a massive dub. Like that guy, that is one of my 5 to like 10 favorite random like non-all-star guys in the league. I just love watching him play. I love the intensity. I love the length. I love the confidence. Like that guy is
cases
awesome.
Where everybody in the organization 2 years before the big breakout was talking about how the breakout was coming,
and it was actually right.
Could not just thrust enough hyperbole onto the Jaden McDaniels hype train. And it worked. And it ended up just like exactly what they said was going to happen. Oh, don't worry, the 3-point shot will come around. Defensively, he's all NBA, potential there. And we're like, all right, he's good defensively. He's probably not that good defensively. And I don't know if that 3-point shot's ever going to happen. And then it all just came together. So credit to them.
Yeah, down year from 3 last year, but like you kind of got to see if that holds or not. But everything else about him is just perfect. And it's like you get that guy, you already have Ant, you got Conley. You probably have to find a Mike Conley successor long term. I don't know if Dillingham's exactly that. I don't think Terrence Shannon's exactly that, but that's not a problem for right now. We're thinking about right now, this team is stacked at a spot, has its identity. I think it also helps that Chris Finch is a really fucking good coach and really good at moving the pieces around, really good at designing things, really good at intentionality. Just an average NBA coach, Wes, I think this would be my take. In a league where I don't always know how valuable coaches are, I do think just like an average milquetoast, boring vanilla NBA coach could mean the Wolves are not like a 50-win regular season team. Yeah. I think it helps that they have Chris Finch, who has figured out and is smart enough to figure this out.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, okay, their roster flaw is so loud that the thing that Chris Finch is troubleshooting for, everybody recognizes it, and when it works, you give him credit for it, right? Like what he's troubleshooting for is basically the blue screen of death for NBA rosters, which is two bigs who can't play together in Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. And it still hasn't exactly worked, but he has maximized that duo obviously as much as he possibly can. They were in the Western Conference Finals last year. And so I think Chris Finch is an awesome coach. I don't know how awesome he ultimately is. Is he awesome enough to win a championship? I guess we'll find out at some point. But it does help him a little bit that the issue at hand is so loud. It's a little bit like when Brad Stevens designed really good sideline out of bounds plays. And it's just something that even the casual fan can recognize and put a pattern in place for. It's like, that play looked cool. It resulted in a basket. Brad Stevens is the best coach in the NBA, right? Like, that was a thing that a lot of NBA people did. There's a lot that goes into NBA coaching, more than just maximizing a troublesome duo or more than just slob plays and all these things. I'm, again, not taking anything away from Chris Finch. It's more of a point to say, like, the thing that he does well is highlighted by the biggest roster flaw that they have, and that helps us recognize an elite coach when we see it. So that's my Chris Finch thing. I have three other teams that I want to talk about, two teams that I don't really want to talk about, one team that I actually think could make an argument to be in this sort of mix here.
Let's do it.
Let me knock off the two teams that I don't really want to talk about, but I want to mention. The Pelicans and the Grizzlies, I think, have been two of the deeper teams in the league over the last couple of seasons. I could not put them in this mix now because their depth at center is so troublesome. It's so precarious there at the 5 for both teams. Memphis, I feel a little bit better about because I like Zach Edey, but I've been wrong about stuff before, and if he's not any good, then they have a real problem at that position. And the Pelicans, I like Yves Missi quite a bit. I just don't think he's ready to contribute at a high level as a rookie. I don't know what they're doing at center. I don't know what they're doing with Brandon Ingram, whatever. So they could end up being in this mix, but right now I don't feel good about them. The other team I had was Dallas.
Yeah.
Luka, Kyrie, Klay Thompson now, Derek Lively, PJ Washington. You have Daniel Gafford. The Spencer Dinwiddie signing was sneaky good for them. He actually was pretty good for them before they moved him in the Kyrie Irving deal. So I think, and it sounds like everybody's really excited to have him back. That's the word out of Dallas, at least now. And then after that, you've got like a really interesting kind of group. Dante Exum, Quentin Grimes, who I still like, Najee Marshall, who I've always liked. And then you've got like the Jaden Hardy, OMP kind of wild cards. Like, can they take that next step and really be a part of this rotation? I think the Mavericks rotation is awesome. And they could battle Minnesota for the second best rotation in the West. Heck, they could battle Oklahoma City for the best rotation in the West. It would not shock me. They are that good.
I love this pick, and I think there's one thing that they did this summer that really affirmed this to me. And it wasn't the Klay thing, which I loved. I think that in some ways raises questions about what this team looks like to some degree from a balance standpoint, but that we'll see how that plays out.
That's fair.
I love that they didn't like overpay to keep Derrick Jones Jr. and went and sent a guy Najee Marshall.
Yep.
Derrick Jones Jr., they probably got the 100% season out of him last year. They got the best Derrick Jones Jr. season any team is ever going to get. I would have understood keeping him because you're probably also a team with Luka, with Kyrie, that has a certain particular way to maximize what he is and his weirdness as a not really super good shooting wing who can really dunk and cut and defend. But saying we're not going to overpay that guy to keep other flexibility, do other stuff, and add, and we're going to get Najee Marshall, who's a little less proven in terms of a playoff run, but has the profile of a really good playoff wing, and be the team that takes a flyer on Quentin to rehabilitate Quentin Grimes, who was great in the New York and got hurt in Detroit and everything. And also we have Prosper, and like they have all these other kind of pans on the stove that are cooking, and they didn't need the one that could have easily come back in their face, been a burnt dish. This is a really bad analogy, but I'm going for it. They let that one go, and they kept these other things going, and I think that is one of the smartest things any team did this offseason, because I think sometimes teams do fall, like I understand falling in love with your own stars. Like there's a reason, like the Cavs this summer, for instance, we're like, got to keep Mitchell. Like even if you want, like we have to do this. We have to play hardball. Even with Darius Garland and Jared Allen, I get it. When it gets to your role guys, if you fall in love with them too much, you're just hurting yourself. And I think not falling too in love with Derrick Jones Jr. was really smart for Dallas.
And also not falling too in love with Josh Green, right?
Yeah.
They were able to move him in deals that made the team better. And I think they ended up getting a guy who could potentially be better than Josh Green and Quentin Grimes. So I think it works. I have similar concerns in terms of, do they still have the two-way balance? I really like the Klay Thompson signing for them. I don't necessarily think he needs to start. I don't think he's going to close games for them. I guess we'll find out. The biggest question for Dallas, which is not something that Oklahoma City or Minnesota necessarily needs to worry about right now, is who is their third best player? Is it Klay Thompson? Because if it is, that actually might be a problem. If it's Derek Lively, then I think you really got something. And I think it could be. I think it really could be Derek Lively. It could be PJ Washington also. I don't mean to leave him out there, but the best version, I think, of the Dallas Mavericks is if Derek Lively kind of becomes that third best player. Maybe it's by the end of this season. Maybe it's a couple years from now. But that to me is sort of the best version of how Dallas would work, right? And so, and especially if and what does that mean for Derek Lively to be their third best player? I'm not talking about necessarily a third scoring option, just their third best player. That means that Derek Lively is a defensive player of the year candidate. It means he's an all defensive candidate. And that's kind of the exact kind of player you need next to Luka and Kyrie, isn't it? So, I really like the Dallas roster. I think they could come for the throne there, but I would give Oklahoma City right now, obviously, the edge, and Minnesota a little bit of an edge over Dallas.
So let's end on this, Wes.
Okay.
Are there any other teams out there that you're like, they are close? Like you mentioned a couple, but do you have any other teams in the league, either conference, that you're like, okay, these teams could get there? They're one move away teams in terms of having a rotation you really like.
I mean, I think I already pretty much hit it on Memphis. If Zach Edey pops the way I think he can, when you have his screen setting, it's close to what Steven Adams was giving them a couple years ago when John Morant was healthy. You just need that brick wall screen setter next to John Morant. You want to be able to run those pinch post kind of plays. You want to be able to do all those things. Give John Morant an inch, and that's all he needs. Can Zach Edey do that? I would bet on that happening. I think he was an awesome screen setter at Purdue. I think he'll work out in the NBA. I'm not as concerned about the athletic shortcomings and all these things that most people are. But like I said before, I could definitely be wrong on that. Like I am totally open to being wrong on Zach Edey, so that's fine. But if that hits, then yeah, I think Memphis, you look at John Morant, Desmond Bane. You've got Marcus Smart now part of the mix. We never really got to see that long term with everybody they've got going. I know Brandon Clark. We got to see if he's healthy or not. There's still some questions that I have about that roster, but I like Vince Williams. I like a lot of those. I like Gigi Jackson. I like the upside on all those guys. They brought Kennard back. There's stuff I like. That's a rotation that I like a lot. And when you look at the top of it, it just works. It's a roster that has won a lot of games in the past. It wouldn't shock me if the Grizzlies had the most wins in the Western Conference last year, right? Because you're going to have a motivated Ja Morant and a team that wants to prove itself again. So that would be the other team that I would look at.
I have two in the East that I'll shout. They actually played each other in the playoffs last year. One, the Cleveland Cavaliers. I just think they're one. Like, if you could just improve on the Niang spot and flip his money for something else, I'd feel great about it. Maybe Kenny Atkinson is a guy who just fully embraces Sam Merrill as a shooter. Like, maybe that's just a thing that really works for them. But Craig Porter could take a step forward this year. I know they're high on Jalen Tyson internally as a rookie. We'll see where that gets you. But I think they're like one move away from me feeling really good about that. It's like LeVert and Niang are the 2 and the 8 that I'm like, even among the other fit stuff. But those two guys, but I think they're close. And I believe that like Garland instance is just better than he was last year. Orlando is the other one.
Yep. I thought about
Paolo, Franz, Suggs, KCP. You got Mo Wagner and Batadze. You have a Wendell Carter Jr. trade, I think, staring you in the face at some point to go get something else.
Jonathan
And if
Isaac.
Jonathan Isaac, and if Anthony Black is good in year 2 or takes a step forward in year 2 as a playmaker, as a big guard for them, can give you like a different energy than what Fultz gave you last year, I become even more in love with the Orlando Magic this year.
I'm glad you mentioned Anthony Black because when I was kind of going through this, I did stare at the Orlando Magic depth chart for a long time, and I'm like, if they can get something from Anthony Black, then they are definitely they enter the chat, right? They
Like,
are
would it
part of
shock
this.
you if they if they went, let's say it gets like round 2 this year and they're playing Philly and they just took Philly to, it would not shock me if they have it in them to take
Oh.
one of these teams to 7. They really do, I think.
Yeah, and I'm actually pretty bullish on Anthony Black. I think a lot of people sort of made fun of Orlando's guard play last year and the rookie class that they had. I thought Anthony Black was actually he showed some things, but it comes down to like Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner taking those next leaps too, right? Like we could talk about the depth, like I said, we could talk about guy 6, guy 7, guy 8 all we want, but if they're gonna push Philadelphia or a team like this that's going to be above them in the standings in a playoff series, it's going to be because Paolo and Franz have taken leaps as all-star players, right? And those leaps are going to happen. I think Paolo's going to be an all-NBA type player. I think Franz Wagner can be close to it, if not fully an all-NBA player. It's just a matter of when, to me. And does that happen this season?
Yeah, it's a great shot. I'm very fascinated. Wes, anything else? It's a quiet time in the NBA calendar. WNBA is back. Caitlin Clark cooking, Liberty looking great. So maybe we'll find a guest to talk about that at some point as well. But anything else for you kicking around in the NBA calendar right now?
In the NBA calendar, no. But part of my calendar was going on a little staycation this last weekend. My wife and I went down to Key Largo, and the way that my wife and I like to vacation is we like to vacation. We like to relax. We don't like to do many things. That should not be surprising to you, Chris.
No.
But we did walk by like a little hut where they were offering water sports, and they were offering 3 things. They were offering snorkeling, jet skis, and they were offering like little boat rides and stuff like that. You were on let's say that you're in Key Largo on vacation with
looking
a
this up.
friend
I'm
or
looking this up
family or
where it's on a map, by the
significant
way.
other. You don't know where Key Largo is?
I'm just checking. Like, I'm from the Midwest, Wes.
It's south of Miami.
Okay, I'm learning.
North
things.
of Cuba.
Okay,
It's
north.
an island.
I mean, I figured north of Cuba. That tracks.
That's everything that's
Okay.
there.
Okay.
Okay. It's like an hour drive south of where we're at.
Okay.
So that's why I consider it a staycation. If it's within an hour, it's like more staycation.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Sure.
those 3 options or nothing. You've got 2 days in Key Largo. Water's beautiful. I'm gonna say it's all free. Even you don't even have to pay for it.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
gonna make this all free for you. Snorkeling, jet skis, boat ride, or none of the above. The boat ride is like a fishing thing. You got to wake up early, do fishing. the
okay.
whole
Then
thing.
if it was just like I could sit on a boat and like have someone drive me around and I could drink alcohol and like smoke
Well,
a
you
cigar,
do all of
that would-
that. No, you do
Yeah,
all of
but,
that, but
like-
you also fish.
I'm not really into fishing. It's not really
Well,
my
nobody's
outdoor
into
thing.
fishing.
No,
So you're
I have
into
a.
fishing. You're just into
oh,
doing the thing on the boat, right? You just put the thing, you put the rod on the thing, and then you just do whatever
There
you
are
want.
people who are like really into fishing. Like,
No, I know.
okay, just
I do
checking
live here.
this. Okay,
But come on.
I have a okay.
It's like being into golfing. It's like, yeah, there's like 1% of the population. The rest of us
Who's
are
really
just on the rest of us just want to drive a golf cart and drink beer at 9:30 in the morning.
I mean, the last time I got a tattoo, I learned all about I was reminded about maybe the fishing scandal that like when the people like caught the fish at this tournament and put weights in the fish so they could win. It's like a whole thing.
That's genius.
They got caught, and then people were really mad.
Oh, well, they should take the magnets out after they weigh it in so that it doesn't get caught by airport security.
Yeah. My answers do nothing.
My man.
I am at a phase in my life where like I'm about to go on vacation. It's a 5-hour drive, so it is a little bit further away. My itinerary is I'm gonna go on a hike in the Michigan National Parks one day for a couple hours and just get some nature, get some steps in. Other than that, I will be going to restaurants in the area that I want to try. I will be going to this cool little like boutique movie theater they have.
Mm-hmm.
And I will be sitting on a beach reading a book. That is my itinerary.
That's awesome, man. I'm the same way. We walked right by that hut, and I looked at my wife. I'm like, "You want to do any of that?" And she goes, "No." We even saw people having a great time jet skiing. We saw like proof of concept in front of us, like people just laughing. It was like a couple, like, yeah, we're having so fun. I'm like, they look like they're having fun. And she was like, yeah, they look like we're having fun. They're having fun. I'm like, do you want to do it? And they're like, nope, still don't want to do it. I'm like, yeah, me neither. We could just go to the pool. The bar's open. Like, what are we talking about? We could just easily. It's so much easier to just not do it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm still having a great time.
If you had to pick one, which would you pick?
Probably the jet skiing because it keeps me out of the water. Right? I don't want to go snorkeling in the Keys. I don't know how much you know about Key Largo. I don't know if you ever watched like Bloodline on Netflix. It's a murdery kind of place.
Yeah. Shout out Kyle Chandler, man.
Shout out Kyle Chandler. I think in
Ben Mendelsohn.
There was
Lisa Cardellini's out on the show.
Great Ben Mendelsohn performance. But somewhere 10 minutes, I think north of Key Largo, like $1.5 million of cocaine washed up on that shore.
Hell yeah.
So that's the vibe. So I don't need to go snorkel looking for that kind of stuff. I'm good. I don't need to see any bodies. I'll stay above water. If I had to do it, I would do jet skiing. But you would have to pay me to get on a jet ski at 33 years old at this point. I have no interest in doing it.
It's not in your actually, literally, the podcasters all like NBA players have contracts and you just can't jet ski. That's your excuse.
Yes,
you got to tell people that.
Do you know who I am?
It's like, yeah, I'm Wes Goldberg from Just Basketball and Lockdown Heat and Lockdown NBA. Like I literally cannot jet ski for it's in my contract.
No,
I can't risk this.
I'm podcasting every day. I can't risk it. I can't take
sometimes.
A day off.
Yeah, like the content machine means can't risk it.
Yep.
I would go snorkeling, but also like I'm imagining like there's a horror movie to be written like about like
I would
the
go. I would
cocaine
pick
and the
snorkeling
sharks.
somewhere else.
Okay.
For the record, I would do that anywhere. If you were like coast of Australia, I'm like, I'll snorkel, and I know that all the most dangerous creatures live there, but yeah, not in Key Largo. I'll pass on being part of a murder investigation. Thank you.
Makes total sense. All right, we're going to end there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Wes Goldberg. We'll be back next week with more Just Basketball. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your summer. NBA season coming up sooner than you think. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again to BetMGM. Code Just Basketball. Get that first bet bonus offer. Have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.